There's no such thing as simple. Simple is hard.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
July 1990. Goodfellas is poised to win the hearts of critics and moviegoers alike. But Martin Scorsese is already 3 months into a project that he's been putting off for 7 years. In 1993, Universal Pictures purchased the film rights to Schindler's Ark, a novel about a German businessman who saved more than 1,000 Polish Jews from certain death. Riding a wave of success following the release of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the studio had given the nod to Steven Spielberg, but the director felt that he wasn't mature enough for such a serious undertaking. Sidney Pollack and Roman Polanski also turned down the offer. The fourth candidate to be asked, however, accepted. Scorsese found the script enthralling, but a tight schedule and difficult preparations were delaying production. The window of opportunity finally opened during post-production of Goodfellas.
Hey, here he is.
Oh, you broke your cherry.
But by that time, the director had lost the desire to pursue the Schindler's Project. Challenges that the director had faced upon the release of The Last Temptation of Christ were his primary deterrent. He didn't want to relive the boycotts, bodyguards, and threats that had been the fallout of his previous film. This was compounded by the fact that he couldn't find the actors to fill the starring roles. Meanwhile, Spielberg had by that time already directed 2 installments of Indiana Jones, Empire of the Sun, and Jurassic Park. The feeling of immaturity he had once had was now gone, and he desperately wanted another shot at the director's chair for the film. In exchange, Steven offered Martin the opportunity to direct a remake of the thriller, Cape Fear.
All I could think about was busting out and killing somebody. I wanted to kill him with my bare hands, slow.
A project that Steven had spent a decade pursuing. The film had already been greenlighted by the studio and had a $35 million budget. Was this the greatest decision in cinematic history, or a missed opportunity? It doesn't matter. The trade was made. Scorsese immediately took to rewriting the script. Screenwriter Wesley Strick had meticulously thought through every detail of the narrative with Spielberg. But the author had to write another 24 different versions of the story before Martin was satisfied. The final script was then shown to Robert De Niro.
I'd seen the original, I liked it. I liked the idea of the revenge and all that. And
I don't think you really understand what we're talking about here. 14 years.
The actor was attracted by the idea of stepping outside his typical roles to play psychopath Max Cady.
Come out, wherever you are.
He spent 7 months in the gym getting in shape for the role, with shirtless scenes being moved to the end of filming so that De Niro could be in peak physical condition. Robert's tattoos in the movie are real, but they were made from a vegetable-based ink that wore off after 3 months.
I don't know whether to look at him or read him.
The actor also voluntarily paid a dentist $5,000 to ruin his teeth. It ended up costing De Niro 5 times that amount to have them restored.
Money. Cancer. Do I look destitute to you?
Scorsese wanted to land Harrison Ford for the role of Sam Bowden, but neither he nor De Niro were able to convince the actor to take the part. Upon learning of the role's vacancy, actor Nick Nolte jumped on the opportunity. He had been dreaming of working with Scorsese again after their collaboration on New York Stories, so the actor hounded him for 3 weeks until Martin finally broke down and gave Nolte the leading role.
Good.
The casting of Juliette Lewis was De Niro's idea. Martin was looking for an unknown teenaged actress, among whom the likes of Reese Witherspoon and Drew Barrymore were touted as options, but Robert suggested the characters be more mature. The first and only contender for the role was Juliette.
Okay, night now.
Okay. Good night.
She showed up for the casting call without her parents and was found to be a perfect fit for the role after reading just 1 line.
You're not the drama teacher, are you?
Maybe I'm the big bad wolf.
By the way, the actress had received full legal emancipation from her parents at the age of 14 in order to join the Screen Actors Guild and work independently. Legally speaking, she was an adult.
Your parents don't want you to achieve adulthood. That's natural. They know the pitfalls of adulthood. All that freedom, they know it only too well.
Last to join the ensemble were Jessica Lange and the leading actors from the original film, Gregory Peck,
King Solomon could not have adjudicated more wisely honor.
Robert Mitchum,
Trouble is, poisoning a dog is just a fine. But if he's unemployed, you gotta have money, or we'll bust him for vagrancy.
and Martin Balsam.
This court does not condone feuds, vendettas, or vigilantism.
Scorsese had to find a replacement for cinematographer Michael Ballhaus, who had previously agreed to film Dracula for Francis Ford Coppola.
Welcome to my home.
The primary candidate was Robert Richardson, who had been working in tandem with Oliver Stone for 6 years. At the last minute, however, horror film veteran Freddie Francis agreed to get behind the camera.
He understood mood, he understood angles, uses of lenses, and we had a really good time working with him.
Not wanting to miss the opportunity to work with the master, Scorsese promised Richardson a spot on one of his upcoming projects. Filming began in November of 1990 and lasted 4 months.
What the hell are you doing?
As with all of his films, the director welcomed improvisation.
Are you offering me something hot?
No, it wasn't that good. I don't know, something about it. Didn't have, it was great, it was great.
In addition to the scripted dialogues, there is an entire scene that was born on set. According to the script, the scene at school is supposed to be a chase, but Lewis and De Niro decided to play it out as a seduction.
You thought about me last night, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
The very first take was included in the final cut.
So I shot 2 cameras, and I think basically the scene is, the second half of the scene, the tighter shots, were basically all one take. It just happened, it was very like theater.
By the way, Scorsese was so impressed by the portrayal of Max Cady that he was seriously intimidated by De Niro's accent.
I'm gonna enjoy this all the more.
Robert took advantage of this and would leave threatening messages on Martin's answering machine a couple times a week.
You can use all those fears to draw upon and learn.
There were plenty of trials as well. Laurie's torture scene was shot over 2 15-hour days, and the actress spent half of that time in handcuffs.
I don't know what I was thinking.
God only knows.
I could barely walk, and my arms were all cut up from thrashing around, and then De Niro complimented me. He said that Charles Grodin was a pussy because he couldn't take the handcuffs off when they did Midnight Run.
Thanks. Because it's starting to cut into my wrist. Thank you.
I thought that was a supreme compliment.
The culminating scene of the fight between the Bowden family and Max Cady was shot in a specifically designed 30-meter water tank. A real houseboat, as well as artificial rain and wind machines, were installed inside the cistern. Amazingly, Martin had thought out and drawn each frame before a location was even built. Minimal adaptation was needed for Freddie Francis to capture Martin's drawings on camera. Once post-production on the film had been completed, the director, for the first time in his career, listened to the opinions of test screening audiences. Viewers found several scenes to be confusing, so Scorsese again gathered the film crew for a few more shots. These details helped preserve the integrity of the narrative. For example, in the original version, Cady is never shown grabbing the rope, so audiences had no idea how he had gotten back on the boat. These corrections must have helped because Cape Fear became the 8th most lucrative film of 1991, ranking in over $180 million at the box office. At the Academy Awards ceremony, both Robert De Niro and Juliette Lewis received Oscar nominations. Martin was surrounded by success, except in his personal life. With the release of his new film came his 4th divorce, and although his relationship with Barbara DeFina remained amicable, that brought him little comfort. How can a director express his pain? Simple. Shoot a costumed melodrama. While still on the set of Raging Bull, Martin's friend and film critic Jay Cox introduced him to The Age of Innocence. When you do that romantic piece, this one is you. Scorsese had read the novel 7 years later, but his desire to turn it into a movie didn't appear until after Cape Fear. The project got the attention of 20th Century Fox, so the director agreed to work on a screenplay adaptation, provided that he could write it with Jay. Fox had approved a $30 million budget for the film. Martin hired production designer Dante Ferretti, who had become famous for the scenery in Federico Fellini films, and also offered the leading roles to the actors he saw in the first days of preparation: Daniel Day-Lewis, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Winona Ryder. Lines were being rehearsed, scenes were being rewritten, and costumes were being sewn. Not the best time to cancel a deal, but nevertheless, that's exactly what the studio did. Scorsese was fortunate enough to be rescued by Columbia Pictures' Mark Canton, with whom the director had created Goodfellas. Mark provided the budget and took over negotiations with the owner of the old houses, where they had been planning to shoot most of the scenes. The film's hallmark is in its attention to detail. Among the numerous paintings shown in the film can be seen surprises like The Last of the Mohicans. Daniel Day-Lewis had just starred in a film of the same name.
Is that all you've been concerned about? It's long past.
No less impressive were the costume design, which received an Oscar, and of course, the script.
Are you very much in love with her?
As much as a man can be.
Do you think there's a limit?
Scorsese once called The Age of Innocence his most violent film, with its opposing moral and physical pain.
You won't go back.
I won't go back.
But the Motion Picture Association must be okay with that kind of pain, because for the second time in his career, they gave the film a PG rating.
Why?
I don't know.
Editing turned out to be the greatest challenge in creating the film. The new genre presented some difficult obstacles. The Age of Innocence contains few L cuts, while jump cuts and dissolves abound.
Mrs. Manson Mingott sent out invitations summoning everyone to a formal dinner. The dinner, New York read on the invitation, was to meet the Countess Olenska.
Stylistically, the film is unlike any other, and it took Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker a year to get it right. However, the main reason for the delay was the death of Martin's father, Charles, to whom the movie is dedicated. The Age of Innocence flopped at the box office, but earned 5 Oscar nominations. Gabriella Pesciucci brought home the trophy for Best Costume Design. Winona Ryder was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, while Daniel Day-Lewis wasn't in the running for an award only because he was already being considered for his role on the drama In the Name of the Father. Only Mr. Day-Lewis could find himself in such a predicament.
I don't think you'll ever quite be like everybody else.
Hey, do you like our work? Let us know with your like and comment. Push that subscribe button and share with your friends. If you want to support the project financially, become our sponsor on Patreon or YouTube sponsorship. Thank you.